everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast. I'm the host today. Yay! I'm so lucky. I'm Dr. Tammy Nemeth of the Nemeth Report, and I'm the host. And we also have today the usual gang. We've got David Blackman, who's in Texas right now. Hey, David, how you doing?
Just wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Texas, as always.
As always, yes. No tornadoes yet?
Not yet. And we haven't really had the severe weather as much where we are in the Metroplex as they've had up in Oklahoma and Kansas, which is not unusual, but most of it's really gone north of us so far this year.
Well, that's
knocking
good for
on
Texas.
wood as I say that. Okay.
We also have today Irina Slav, who's in Bulgaria. Hey, Irina, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's still warm and pleasant outside, not hot yet. So global warming is a bit late this year.
Well, and congratulations to Bulgaria. I hear that Bulgaria won Eurovision on the weekend.
Yeah. Thank you. It's bringing unwanted attention to the country.
Oh dear. And it's so politically motivated. Why do you think Bulgaria won? Is it because they had a really good act or something else?
I really can't say. It's not really my kind of music, but it's catchy. I guess they just hit the right formula for this sort of thing, and people really liked it. I hear.
Well, that's good.
Don't know if it's surprising because it should be political. It has been very political since 2014, but it's weird. Maybe they just let the people vote. I was rooting for Croatia this year, but I don't really care enough.
I have to say the UK came in last, as always.
I saw that.
I think they got one vote. It's too funny. But yeah, it was pretty bad act, I have to
say.
They
don't do well traditionally.
Yeah, so true. And we have, rounding up the cast today, Mr. Stu Turley, who is... I don't know. Are you in Oklahoma or Texas today, Stu?
I'm in Oklahoma. I had to go to Texas, come back. I got a bear problem, and it's not just a Democrat neighbor. It's a real bear. So I'd rather deal with a bear than a Democrat. So you got to deal with a bear.
Bears are
but I'm
nice.
going back to Texas, so it's like I get to spend a lot of miles. You know, the Strait of Hormuz, thank goodness, doesn't impact me as much as ethanol. Ethanol destroys the car, and I get 3 miles per gallon less when I use ethanol. So, it's kind of sad that I'm going between Oklahoma and Texas between the houses, and I pay more because of ethanol than the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. And that the ethanol mandate is like in every Western country. They have it in Canada, they have it in the UK, Europe, America. So,
and people don't realize that it destroys the gasoline engine. It wipes out your thing. The average cost for ethanol on a car is $4,000 in repairs that you would not have to pay if you didn't have it. Kind of weird.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And I know that you can't leave it in equipment over the winter, or you have to put special conditioner in. Otherwise, it goes bad. Go figure. So
bears are more reasonable than Democrats.
And they have better manners. Yes.
All politicians, really, not just Democrats.
So true. So true. Yeah. Well, today we are talking about how climate activists are striking back. That climate action hasn't necessarily disappeared, even though there's lots of talk out there that with President Trump's energy abundance and energy dominance agenda, that the whole climate issue has sort of fallen off the radar. And while I agree that I think it's fallen off America's radar to some extent, today we're going to talk about how the climate activists are fighting back in their own way in different jurisdictions around the world. And last week, Irina had a brilliant piece about Amsterdam and how they had changed their fossil fuel advertising to ban it and to ban the advertising of meat and anything that could be considered contrary to the climate agenda. And then I followed up in our email chain with the UK doing its thing where ads for meat, beef and dairy have been pulled because of complaints by one of the big sort of celebrity climate activists in the UK, Chris Packham, I think his name is, where, you know, the ads were dumb and they were trying to talk about how if you buy from the UK, the emissions are lower than if you were importing beef and dairy from elsewhere. And the industry was trying to push the net zero agenda, and the activists, of course, don't allow it. So those have been banned now. And then Irina had identified on the weekend, which is kind of related, how the EU is going to start working on a program to maybe ration travel for tourist places, which is crazy. And then I wrote a piece this week about the European Union's packaging rules, which are supposed to be net zero, circular economy, and so on, and how that it applies to everybody, whoever ships anything. You have to pay for its recycling in whatever EU country you ship it to, which is dumb. And so the list goes on. And so that's our discussion today, is all these different little things, I would almost like microaggressions of the climate movement, to try and still undermine reliable energy and to push the sort of Green New Deal approach to life. So, yeah. Irina, let's start with you if you want to have a go at talking about these sort of climate actions striking back.
Well, they're not really striking back, though. They're in the sense that they're still doing what they've always done, but they have been pushed out of the spotlight temporarily. Yeah. So they're being sneaky about it. Well, not really, but, you know, this Amsterdam ad ban was just great. They banned advertising for cruises, for travel, for flights, like stay at home, don't consume energy. And that's really timely in light of the jet fuel crisis that is not going to happen, as we just learned this week from the Financial Times, because refiners are boosting their jet fuel output. There will be enough by some massive numbers. Like Repsol has allegedly increased its jet fuel production by 20 to 25%. In a matter of days. Yeah, impressive job. And then what you sent about meat rationing in Danish nursing homes because of emissions.
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah, we all look up to Scandinavia for the real welfare state where, you pay very high taxes, but then you get to spend your later years in the care of the state because of all these high taxes you've been paying. And now, well, no, bad luck. You're going to be on a meat rations that are minuscule amounts or something like this. What else did you say? Oh, yeah. There was something else. In addition to the packaging nightmare that you wrote about, this reads like a horror story. So much red tape in packaging for emissions' sake. It's insane. And then there was the call by the European Commission to integrate railways within the European Union so we can travel more seamlessly. Nobody's ever had any trouble. If you can enter the Eurozone or the European Union, you can travel fine. So what if you have different providers? But we should travel more by train or not travel at all. And definitely try to travel to more destinations. And they illustrated this with something from Latvia, I think. something. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's beautiful. The Baltics have beautiful nature, but what was this thing and how does it compare to the hottest tourist destinations in Europe? It doesn't really. So now they're trying to prescribe to us, because the biggest climate activists are in government. They're in Brussels. They're trying to prescribe to us where to travel and how to travel, with the suggestion that maybe we shouldn't travel at all.
Yes, that's the
Stay
ultimate
home.
goal.
Which is why I have a bit of a problem with this Eurovision win, because, as I say, it's bringing unwanted attention, and this unwanted attention on social media could translate into tourist attention. which would be very bad for emissions.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That's the only word I can use. And I know it's a word we have been using repeatedly and very frequently, but I have no other way to describe what these people are trying to do. I mean, compared to the politicians that are trying to ration travel and means of travel and all that, and meat eating, and believing that people will buy it. You know, if you ban meat advertising, people are going to go vegan. This
Yeah.
will only
If you don't
result
see a
in more-
burger, you won't have a burger. Is that
Yeah.
the mentality?
I don't know who makes that choice. I think we spoke about this last week when David said that when he was a lot younger, he could get
God.
enticed to eat a burger by an advertisement, but really, who do that these days? Regardless of age, really. So yeah, I think climate activists are really getting desperate. At the same time, I think they're getting more enthusiastic about their thing because of the crisis, energy prices. And now is the time to push for more wind and solar, where we get to more bad news. Did you see this new research out of Oxford University and University College London, which found that coal emissions compromise the output of solar panels?
Oh, darn.
Yeah. Coal emissions are bad for solar panel power generation. So go and
Coal
stop China from
emissions
using
are
coal power
bad.
to produce panels.
Coal emissions are bad for solar panels, but you can't have solar panels without coal to make it.
Just
Yeah.
what I said, yeah.
And slave labor.
Just thought I'd point that out.
Well,
Yeah.
I find it ironic that it's the Oxford and UK universities who did the study, because they're also supporting the geoengineering to darken the sun, you know, to put particulate matter to reflect the sun's rays, which would therefore reduce the amount of solar coming down to ostensibly power the, you know, generate power from the solar panels. So bad coal, don't do that, but we're going to do it else, you know, in another way by putting particles in the atmosphere. So it's like you can't win with these people. David, let's go to you. What do you think about some of the climate activists activities in the US? Do you find that they're a little more understated now? Is it more at the local level? I saw an article about this Pathways to Dairy Net Zero, which is supposedly a industry-led collaboration. But what they do is they send letters to all of the dairy producers that like ship milk or whatever to Danone or one of these other large multinational corporations, Nestle or whatever. And then they ask for all these different things, like what is your emissions profile? How much methane are you doing? All this different stuff.
Right.
But then if you don't, it's voluntary, but if you don't answer the questions, then they don't want to take your milk. So it's like, just this time it's industry led rather than
Right.
the activists
Yeah.
coming in, but the activists have pressured the industry to do it. That's just one
Yeah.
example.
It's like the old Energy Star program, you know, which was energy industry led. It was a collaboration with government by the makers of kitchen appliances and heaters and, you know, home appliances to make their appliances more energy efficient, to cut emissions, cut the power they use, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, so those kinds of things don't concern me so much, but overall, the activists in this country, they're not getting traction with the federal government, and they're not getting traction anymore with governments in what we call red states that are governed by Republicans. But they get plenty of traction still in the blue states like New York and Massachusetts and California and Illinois. And you know, the 23 or so blue states in the country are still perfectly fine with the climate activists. But overall, you know, the 24 election has really cut back on the ability for these conflict groups like the Sierra Club, like the NRDC and the Rocky Mountain Institute and all these activist groups that thrive on conflict and maintaining conflicts and never solving any problems, but perpetuating them to raise money. And so what they're doing now, because they're not able to raise as much money from climate alarmism as they had been able to under Biden, is they're now going after the data center industry. So they're expanding their activities now to attack other industries. And the data center industry is just like big oil. You've got big data center now. And Kevin O'Leary, this Mr. Wonderful guy who, thinks he's got all this credibility with the public, and he's trying to be his own spokesperson for his own project in Utah and completely messing everything up. But they're attacking the data center industry using exactly the same tactics, exactly the same issues, exactly the same talking points that they used to attack hydraulic fracturing and the shale revolution 20 years ago. And, I was in the middle of all of that for 15 years throughout that whole thing and saw it progress. And so it's easy to recognize it's the same groups even, that are doing it. And so, so now they're just expanding to attack the data center industry, which has a lot of problems, let's be honest, that they need to deal with transparently and upfront instead of with idiotic false talking points like Kevin O'Leary's trying to do. And so that's the next big conflict here in the United States and probably all over the Western world is going to be fighting the data center industry for good reasons and bad. And but it never ends. These people are insidious. They continue to multiply like cockroaches. The number of groups continues to expand. The areas that they get into continues to multiply. And we see, throughout all industries, throughout all institutions of government, throughout our education system, our entertainment complex, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think there's any real effective way to fight it other than to just keep pushing like we've been doing for the last 30 years to try to get the truth out. And I think the good news there is there's more and more of us doing that too. As time goes along, and more websites and more influencers who are dedicated to the cause than there was 15 years ago. And so, this is the conflict, unfortunately, the societal conflict of our generation and the next generations. It's job security for all of us, I guess. To the extent we still want it. At my age, I'm not sure how much longer I want it, but it's really an amazing phenomenon at the end of the day that we have this segment of our society that is so dedicated to spreading propaganda and fear to raise money for their conflict organizations and to advance a political agenda and a political philosophy, which is at the foundation of all of this. None of this is really about the climate. All of it is about politics. This is my view. All of it is about advancing the cause of Marxism across the Western world. And it has completely consumed all of our global institutions. The United Nations is a big part of it. The World Economic Forum is a big part of it. And, all these global confabs that all the private jets fly to periodically each year and create an amazing amount of emissions that no one wants to talk about is a big part of it. And I don't think we'll see the end of it. I think we're going to have plenty to talk about where activism is concerned for as long as all of us live. And I look forward to the next 5 or 10 years of continuing to talk and write about it.
Great points. I bet that the jet fuel, there will always be a priority for the jet fuel for the private jets.
Well, of course. You couldn't go to Belém to have a COP30 meeting with all the private jets and all the jet fuel that they consume and all the emissions they cause, and the tearing down of the rainforest to build a brand new gleaming highway to bring all those people in from the airport into the center city to hold the conference in what was a big tent, is like a big circus tent, which was totally appropriate.
For sure. Stu, you have a data center being built near you. Is it the Starbase one?
Yep. It's just down the street, and it is it's amazing to see the construction as I drive by it. And the dichotomy of Texas is amazing when you look at the wind turbines that are falling apart. I drive between the houses and I sit there and I look at the oil falling out of the wind turbines, and then I see all these solar farms taking away from farms. And then you have, I believe, maybe 35 to 40 different natural gas turbines coming online. Just the whole thing is a mess. It is absolutely hilarious. The housing prices in Abilene are shooting through the roof. There's now trailer parks all over the place for the workers. Right. Now, data centers only provide work for 10 people after they're built. Before they're built, lots of people want there. The advantage Abilene, Texas has is that the base has got the next generation of fighters and bombers coming into Abilene. So Abilene's growing again, and it's got the B-1 there now. So you've got a combination of Starbase. But where I'm seeing that the database, where there's two things I want to make. The UN really came out last week and said, oh, we don't really mean what we say when we tried to fearmonger all of it. The UN climate panel quietly admitted its doomsday climate scenarios were implausible. How much money has been spent on net zero? Well, for renewables only, we've spent over $10 trillion. Of the $10 trillion, we've only gained 3% energy. I mean, when you take a look at energy as instead of electricity, there's a significant difference. So you got even the UN using this against children. How many children have lost sleep because of the fear of climate? I want some reparations. Give me some reparations right now from the UN budget for all the money that I've spent. Then we take data centers. How many of the data centers are now taking away from eminent domain in the United States is crazy. It is absolutely crazy when you've got Georgia Power and you've got these other data centers. Why don't you put the data centers in a new way where you don't have to have all the water and everything else? Here we are with all this technology and we're wiping out farms like you wouldn't believe. It seems like control rather than data center control going this way, fear mongering going this way. We got two different ways to battle now.
Can I make one comment about what you just said? Is
sure.
the same activists that have zero issue with condemning millions of acres of farmland to build solar panels on, solar farms and wind farms, condemn the land forever with a wind farm because you never take the bases out of from underneath the land, are going crazy with data centers condemning farmland now, a much tinier swath of farmland, frankly, when you compare it to what we're doing with solar arrays. So it's the same activist groups. They're all hypocrites. They have double standards, triple standards, quadruple standards, depending on what form of energy you're talking about.
And who's paying the bill?
Well, ultimately the public pays the bill for all of it.
No, I meant these activists are paid by somebody.
Oh, sure. Yes. I would love to do an audit. See how much is coming from China, frankly.
It's what, sorry?
It's a career. Activism, climate activism is a career.
Yeah.
well-paying, I assume, if they're so active in being activists.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a range, I would say, of about 34 mega financiers. And they range, right? So it's like you have the Arabella Advisors, which takes in lots of money from various things and then funnels it through lots of different groups. So they'll give it to one group, which will then take that and bundle it and give it to another group. And so therefore it's sometimes very difficult to track where the money originated from originally. But there's a lot of different funders out there. I think the Honorable Jason Isaacs put together a recent report where he had done a longer one back in December, and then he condensed it down to about, I think, 3 or 4 pages about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where he identified like 39 billion going towards different activist groups, just specifically to target the data centers. And I think one of the fascinating aspects of it is last weekend, it was the Center for Progress Action, their big annual conference. It was held in Toronto. It's sponsored by the Center for American Progress. John Podesta was there, and he gave a speech. And what he said was that the problem with the data centers is that they require and encourage the use of hydrocarbons, like, fossil fuels.
Really?
And I'm quoting him here where he said, "It will doom our chance to build a net zero world."
Yeah.
So if you wanted to understand what's the motivation behind, the exploitation of legitimate concerns, you don't have to look no farther than what John Podesta said. Because if you have a reason for using reliable energy, which is the AI data centers, and this is where I'm sort of torn between it, because the data centers will be used to monitor everything that we do in order to ensure that where we travel, how we're traveling, what we're eating, all these different kinds of things that we've talked about. And the need for smart meters, because you need the AI in order to monitor how all that's going, and when you should be using energy, when you shouldn't be using energy, and so on. So you need the data centers for it, but you need the reliable energy for those data centers. So it puts the activists at a bit of a conundrum, because on the one hand, they want the AI to be able to do all this, to manage us, to manage all the data that's being generated, but they need the reliable energy to do it. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the end. Which side's going to win? I'm not sure. And then you have to think also of the foreign, the role of China in all this. Does this benefit China? Right?
Yes.
So
that's what I was saying. I would love to have an audit to see how much of the money behind all this is coming from China. But don't the climate activists like John Podesta have an alternative to use of fossil fuels for these data centers, right? That would be to build a wind and solar and battery technology that actually can meet the needs of 99.999% uptime that these data centers require. Okay. And the fact is, and the fact that these data centers are going to natural gas turbines mainly, and also nuclear and coal where it's available, just tells the story that wind and solar and batteries can't get it done. Okay. They can't be base load. They'll never be able to be base load. And it doesn't matter what the battery technology evolves into. They will never be able to replace base load. And these data centers have to have base load. They can't have intermittent energy sources. So,
what I would add to that is that what Podesta said, what he followed up with was the only way data centers can, if I'm summarizing here, can get social license is if they commit to building wind solar batteries. So that's the only way that the activists will kind of back off, is if the data centers will build out the wind solar batteries. Okay, maybe that's one of the cudgels they'll be using in these discussions with local communities, but I don't know.
I'm sure it will be.
Local communities are not made up of activists. I understand that local communities near data centers have other much more real problems with data centers, such as water consumption and energy bills. So
Well,
You-
yeah, I mean,
you know,
Kristen Walker had a really good piece last week at Real Energy, um, documenting if that's true. So quite often, as David well knows, as we all know, when fracking started happening, there were all these complaints about water use, that it's using all this water.
And they were
it's,
valid.
It's
I'm
some,
sorry, go ahead.
right.
Yeah.
But then when they started recycling the water and that argument was taken away, then it was just a pivot to another thing. Now, some of the data things that I've been researching, the data centers, is they use a lot of the recycled water. So once again, it's taking a legitimate concern, a legitimate fear from the local people, and then exploiting it for these other purposes. And it's the same thing with the electricity prices. What Kristen went through all the different states where they have the data centers, and it's actually the prices are going down, not going up. And it's in the states and the jurisdictions that have too much wind and solar, where their prices are already really high. Those are the places where they're saying that it's the data center's fault, but it isn't. It's these policies that the governments had chosen. And I would just add one last thing. Sorry, Stu.
It's in the United States, the blue states versus the red states, 38% higher electricity costs because of policies, not because of that. You take a look at Texas. Texas is an idiot. We are absolutely idiots in Texas. We have wind, solar, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we've got
More than anybody.
180 megawatts of nameplate capacity. We only need 32. So we've overpaid for all of that extra capacity, and it's all wind and solar, and it's absolutely going to have to be replaced. And there is no land reclamation for it. We have 220 gigawatts planned. When you take a look at the visual capitalist for data centers in the United States, Texas is going to be the king of data centers. I'm okay with data centers, but done right without stealing land, farmland. Let's put them in. Why don't we put our data centers in downtown Chicago where the buildings are vacant? Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, so last week we had this speech from the throne in the UK. So I want to kind of pivot here to a bit of a policy discussion. Irina, what did you make of what they're proposing in the UK with respect to creating an Energy Independence Act that will ban all future fossil fuel development in the North Sea?
What speech is that? I don't watch speeches.
Okay, so when the parliamentary session opens in the UK, they have the king read off this speech about all the different priorities that the new legislative session will target. And they're proposing 37 new bills, one of which is an Energy Independence Act that will be to triple down on wind, solar, EVs, and have a permanent ban on fossil fuel development in the North Sea.
All development or just new development? This is important.
Not sure, because the act hasn't come out yet, but there's lots of talk that it will phase out the existing in an accelerated fashion.
That's great for these energy companies that are still doing business in the UK's North Sea. It'll just make it easier for them to up and go, without any doubt. But I would love to see this. Well, I wouldn't love, you know what I mean? In a twisted way, I would love to see this happening and how it will work out, because we all know how it will work out, which is it won't. And now with this new research about coal emissions, sure, okay, the UK doesn't have coal much, but probably those emissions travel. And if there's a coal power plant in the vicinity, you know, it sounds like an idiotic joke, but this is actual energy policy. It's quite disheartening. So they continue to staunchly believe that if the UK sources all of its electricity from wind and solar and batteries, they will make any meaningful contribution to reducing the planetary emissions of carbon dioxide when the whole of Asia is ramping up coal generation because they can't afford whatever LNG is available.
Yeah.
They're tripling down on lunacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
That's
EU is as well.
really
right?
horrible. Yeah, we know climate change is real, but shutting down baseload electricity generators and replacing them with wind and solar is not going to stop the climate from changing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for my tone, but we've heard this so many times.
I would add that the UK no longer has coal power. They blew up their last
Did
station.
they?
I think it
Okay,
was.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think last year or the year before, they had to restart a coal power plant. Can't remember.
Yeah, I don't think so. That was before, but I think those last ones have all been shut down now.
Just to make sure
Um,
they would never be able to use them
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. David, what do you think of what the UK is putting forward to
Well,
ban that and triple down?
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise at all. Keir Starmer, his government suffered an amazing setback in the local elections. And so what do the communists running his government do, including Ed Miliband? They triple down on the failed policies that led to that election catastrophe. This is the way of leftists all over the world. And, I know I get off topic onto these things and I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but the Labour Party is a communist party. It is trying to execute a communist takeover of the United Kingdom. And the way communists do that is to just continue to force their policies onto the public, regardless of what the public thinks of them. You seize power, you force your policies onto the public, and you keep doing it until you're forced out of office. And that's what Starmer's government is going to keep doing. So, I mean, those bills, I read that article and it was really no surprise just because of the nature of who's running the government now. And it's really frightening because it's 3 more years till the next required national elections. And that's a lot of time for Ed Miliband and his gang of merry men and women to just completely deconstruct the entire economy before the voters have a chance to correct the horrific mistake they made 3 years ago, or 2 years ago. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. And I've said this before. I mean, all of my ancestors come from the UK and Ireland, and it's just really sad to watch what's happening there. And just like I was sad a lot watching what was happening in the United States during the Biden years. So it's not unique to England, but England is really the kind of glowing light right now, the warning sign for the rest of Europe. And I don't think the rest of Europe is paying much attention to it.
Well,
Yeah.
they will.
Yeah.
They will start to.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Stu, what do you think about what the UK is proposing with banning of fossil fuel developments?
I interviewed a guy named Doomberg a week ago or so. It's been in this news cycle. It seems like months ago, but it was yesterday. It seems like we had 20,000 views on YouTube on that interview. And you sit back and take a look at what he said, really woke me up a little bit. It's that Ed Miliband, who I consider one step shy, he is actually, in my opinion, destined to be a stand-in in a Wallace and Gromit film as a sheep. I mean, this is actually Ed Miliband has the brain power of a sheep in a Wallace and Gromit film. He is probably going to be the next prime minister when you sit back at being the only one survivable. He is a very ruthless individual that will stop at nothing to get more power, except for the UK people. He is all in on solar and wind, and he is behind wiping out the North Sea for oil production. So you've got net zero is going to be his big mantra, and he's potentially the next prime minister. I did not have that one on my bingo card. So when you take a look at Muppet Man absolutely eviscerating the UK, you look at a step back and look at a bigger trading block that I've been talking about for quite a while. It's forming. The new trading blocks are forming. The EU is either going to survive by dismantling and countries breaking apart in the EU. Those that break apart will survive and be independent. If you follow net zero, you will follow deindustrialization. It's pretty plain and simple.
Yeah. Okay. I agree that net zero is something that undermines economies and well-being and standards of living around the world. It's interesting about how China does everything. You know, they have wind and solar.
Yeah.
They've actually been monitoring what the effects of having wind and solar is on the environment, and it's actually not very good. So I'll be interested to see if they maintain those installations once they have Europe and Canada and Australia hooked on all their stuff, and if they pull them down. It'll be interesting. But
isn't that the key? China's a completely rational actor where energy is concerned. So, you know, they're highly profitable making the solar panels and all the equipment for wind, you know, and putting it in themselves. But it's an incredibly profitable enterprise for their economy to supply all the Western countries with all these solar panels and wind farms and everything, and to process their rare earth minerals and all that stuff. They control everything. So, you know, to me, China is really maybe the most rational actor of all countries on earth where energy is concerned, because they have full control of supply chains to such an extent that they're able to profit from it regardless of what it is. And you know, I'm not one who says we need to ban wind and solar. I think wind and solar, you know, you can make them perfectly usable parts of an integrated power grid if you're sensible about the policy of on how you use them. Now, in the United States and probably in Europe, we haven't really been sensible about that and trying to force them to serve in roles that they're really not capable of providing. But you know, China is just this country that just moves forward on all forms of energy and does it in a way that makes sense in their economy and for their energy security and national security concerns. And you know, and their government isn't bothered by the need to hold free and fair elections periodically that could interrupt that process. So they do have that advantage as well.
good point.
Maybe because they're one of the few leaderships in the world that are capable of long-term thinking and planning, because it's markedly absent from European policymaking, for example. But yet, even in Europe, while I was thinking about what you've been saying about the UK and about them going in the same way, even though it's clear that it would lead to nothing good, even the European Union is considering boosting domestic gas output, for example, and quietly encouraging new developments in Cyprus, in Romania, more gas from Azerbaijan, you know, this sort of thing. Even they are acknowledging quietly, of course,
quietly,
that we need hydrocarbons.
They need natural gas. I mean, in their green taxonomy, they allow natural gas to be included as a transition fuel. And there was great debate about that.
They had to,
because they have
to. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why I find the UK example so bizarre.
It
Because on the
is.
one hand, they'll still import it from Norway, which is adjacent, of course, to the UK fields, and they'll import it from Qatar or somewhere. But it's like, why wouldn't you develop your own? Except to say that, oh, we're leading by example. Well, what exactly are you leading if you have to use it anyway, but you don't want to use your own? It makes no sense.
Isn't the UK's power system still 40% natural gas right now?
I don't know what the precise numbers are. They fluctuate because they do have a fair amount of hydro, but the wind takes over so much of it, and the wind is always prioritized on the grid versus
The last
natural
last
gas.
reports I was reading last week were 38 to 40% is still natural gas. I could be wrong, could be a wrong report. I could have dreamed it. But here's what the thing is. You still got a lot of natural gas that you're buying from Norway. Why buy it from Norway when you can drill it for your own? It looks like BP is doing a fantastic job getting ready to leave the UK. The new CEO of BP is doing what she needs to be doing and getting it ready to either move to the US or look for new areas outside of the North Sea, which is sad.
So I just looked it up, and in the past 24 hours, the UK's grid was 37.4% fossil fuels, which is going to be mainly natural gas, maybe all natural gas since coal doesn't exist anymore. And then 24.5% renewables, which is wind and solar, and other sources were 18%. So that was pretty close to it.
Yeah, because it varies day by day, and they, for whatever reason, even though they have all these daily statistics, there's at least an 18-month delay from getting an annual aggregate data from the government. I don't know. It's bizarre. I don't understand why. But there was another big news. Brian Zinchuk had mentioned about the Saskatchewan, and the opposition party has decided to fight tooth and nail the refurbishment of the coal fleet and whatnot. And I'm not surprised, because the federal leader of the party, of the provincial New Democrat Party, which is the Socialist Party in Canada, is Avi Lewis, who's married to Naomi Klein, who has written extensively on how you got to keep it in the ground, all hydrocarbons, and Saskatchewan should be papered over with windmills and solar panels. And as much as they say, oh, we don't take direction from the federal party, that's a lie. And so I'm sure the word came down that they have to fight this tooth and nail. And on Friday, I'm sure maybe you all heard about it. There was the implementation agreement between Alberta and Ottawa for this memorandum of understanding, where basically, in order to even consider building a pipeline to the West Coast, another oil pipeline through the Northwest area, that will only take oil to Asia, apparently, and it will only take decarbonized oil. In order to even start considering that pipeline, the oil sands producers must do the carbon capture project, and it has to be carbon capture storage, because the oil sands, you can't.
How do you decarbonize hydrocarbon?
Right. So it's basically in the production of the oil sands, because it's somewhat energy intensive to process it afterwards. Yeah. Any of the emissions related to that must be captured and stored, because you can't use it for enhanced oil recovery for oil sands production. You can use enhanced oil recovery for other types of fields, but not for oil sands. And now they're talking, well, maybe we should have small modular reactors to generate the heat and energy in order for the in situ oil sands production, or for the upgrading and processing of it. And so they're talking about all that has to be in place before the proper approvals for the pipeline can be given, plus a higher industrial carbon tax.
The carbon tax in Canada is a wealth transfer mechanism. If they don't understand that, it's all it is. They're going to be taxing the only thing that they can actually sell so they can have funds that they can then use according to whatever they want. That Gavin Newsom has absolutely perfected that mechanism. The tax mechanisms on this are absolutely, take a look at the UAE. The UAE gets out of OPEC. They are putting more money, they're quadrupling their pipelines, and they're going to have it done by next year. That's how you build a pipeline. Canada talks about it, does a group therapy hug, and then taxes it. That is not how you build a pipeline.
Can I
going to be
add?
a problem.
I want to add one thing that kind of illustrates the hypocrisy of what happens in Canada. I wrote a piece about the opening, the final investment decision over the weekend at Forbes on Commonwealth LNG exports facility in Louisiana. And a minority investor that owns like 12% of this LNG export project is the Canada Pension Plan Fund. So,
Yeah.
so how does that, it is a very activist fund and, you know, all this net zero stuff. So how does that conform with their net zero target policies? I haven't been able to figure that out. I mean, I'm glad to see them investing so sensibly in American energy. You know, it's great for our economy and it's great for the LNG business here in the United States, but it was quite shocking for me to see them listed as a minority owner in that project.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Fund, they removed their 2050 net zero target, I guess.
Oh, did
And they're being sued by a group of youth activists who say that the pension plan is destroying their future and that it should divest from fossil fuels. And the other thing is, part of their sustainability push, they're funders of Octopus Energy. They've put in almost $1 billion into Octopus. I don't think they've ever gotten a return on that investment, but they say it'll be a long-term thing, that eventually Octopus will be profitable and they'll get their return. And they've also invested in like that wind installation that Trump canceled. So, so they've been investing in, they're trying to balance the portfolio a little bit, but they still have an obligation to the investors to have a return. It's a pension fund.
This is really bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like they know it, which is why they're investing in things that earn them a return. Like an LNG facility. You're going to get a return on that.
There's a great question for Brian Zinchuk. You're all global experts. Have any of you heard of a refinery anywhere in the world seeking to buy decarbonized oil and willing to pay a premium for it?
Well, no, but I was told once that a lot of buyers are interested in low methane LNG.
Yeah.
The source that told me that had a vested interest in low methane LNG, so I took it with a pinch of salt. But I'd like to mention a comment about the Absolute Zero report published by the UK Fires Research Collaboration. I have read this report, and I do try to be polite, but I usually fail. So this report is absolute bonkers. It basically wants to do away with the current transport system of the world as we know it. It wants to kill air travel and significantly reduce maritime travel. And that's just a little part of their ideas. So, I know. Decarbonized oil. What do you want?
That reminds me of a great story from a company I was working for. This was 25 years ago. We had a new executive VP come into the company. We're having a meeting with him, and he's talking to us about how we're making our money. We were one of the biggest gas producers in the United States, and so at one point he asked a guy who's kind of walking him through the system. So tell me what methane is. And the guy looks at him. He says, "Well, Phil, That's where about 95% of our company's revenue comes from. Anyway, sorry for the digression.
I want to make a comment here. It's nuclear or you all are fake. If you cared about, you wouldn't have this discussion, as nuclear would solve the problems. I agree with that nuclear has the potential of solving our problems, but the problem is nuclear. In the United States, we have a nuclear fleet of 94 reactors. I believe China is about 45 nuclear reactors. They are building at scale and doing quite well. They will be
currently under construction. 38 reactors in China currently under construction.
Thank you, David. I was getting to that point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
prove my point. Thank you for
that
that. I appreciate you. I steal all your material anyway, so I appreciate you finishing my sentences.
Sorry.
And so when you sit back and look at how the scale is going, the U.S. is not scaling. We will not make AI data centers happen without natural gas because of the fear-mongering zealots of the climate activists have done a great job shutting down nuclear in the U.S.
We appreciate that commenter informing us that we haven't talked about nuclear enough.
No, and we are all nuclear fans. I am a nuclear.
It's great.
Yeah.
But it can't replace hydrocarbons entirely. It can replace a lot of it for power generation, sure, but it can't replace them entirely. It can't make plastics out of nuclear.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was going to say that. So, yeah, I mean, what I find so interesting about like some of these comments and whatnot is when you look at the whole methane situation. And it's funny because the activists in Canada are trying to force the use of using the term methane instead of natural gas, or they want to change the term to fossil gas in order to give it a negative connotation. Because right now, natural gas has a nice natural sounding
they call it fossil gas. Yeah.
So they call it fossil gas, or they're trying to figure out which term resonates more negatively amongst the population.
Why don't we change it to Nadler gas?
They're nasty gas. Come on.
Jerry Nadler gas. Pull my finger gas. I don't know. Something other than that. They've got to come up with another name. Fossil fuels doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. But so to go back to Brian's point about, is anyone asking for, is there a demand for decarbonized oil and whatnot? Even the Natural Resources Minister of Canada, Tim Hodgson, when he was asked a couple months ago at some conference, I think it was the IEA conference, and he's like, oh, no, there's no market for it right now, but we firmly believe there will be 10 years from now when they're done, right?
I just knew it.
Yeah. Just keep hoping and whatever, but
hopes and dreams.
Yes.
Overregulation will add money to what the consumers pay, no matter what it is. Regulatory overreach across the world has absolutely done it.
So, I mean,
yes, I like this.
Evil gas, Satan gas.
But I like David's nasty gas.
Nasty gas.
I kind of like Nadler, the Nadler effect, Nadler gas. I mean,
that's a rather specific, association. It won't be globally grasped.
Yeah, it doesn't translate outside of the U.S. really, because
exactly.
Jerry Nadler is.
Yeah, we love MD Bone.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's about it. Any last comments? David, Irina, Stu, any last comments on this?
Good job.
Activism will never die.
But it pays well.
But it pays well.
Until it pays well, it will never die. If it stops paying well or paying at all, we'll see.
One day, maybe.
Maybe.
Well, thanks everybody for the entertaining comments today. There was quite a mix.
Yeah, great comments.
And stay tuned for next week, where we'll have another great discussion about something related to energy realities.
Bye.
Maybe we'll talk
everybody.
about nuclear. Yeah. Okay.